Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Abigail Pogrebin. Yiscah Smith is a spiritual activist, educator, mentor, and meditation guide who addresses the spiritual practice of encountering the divine spark within and beyond, and views Judaism as a spiritual practice. Yiscah teaches Jewish contemplative practice and spiritual texts at the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies and at Applied Jewish Spirituality. She has also founded and directs Conscious Community Nachlaot, an organization in Jerusalem that hosts Shabbat in-person spiritual gatherings, virtual guided meditation, and spiritual text classes. She is the author of 40 Years in the Wilderness, My Journey to Authentic Living, and her most recent book, Planting the Seeds of the Divine, Torah Commentaries to Cultivate Your Spiritual Practice, which we're going to talk about today and was published in June 2025. Welcome to the broadcast, Yiscah.
Abby, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, you have these Torah classes or workshops that really happen in your backyard. Can you tell us about those?
Yes, it started, I'd love to. I refer to it as an alternative prayer space. We gather together once a month, Shabbat morning. I share a teaching through the lens of a spiritual understanding or sense of the soul's presence through the text in the weekly Torah portion. And then we chant, we sing together. Then I guide people into a beautiful, sweet, meditative, contemplative practice. And then we share, sing a little bit more. Then we have, of course, when Jews get together, we have to eat. So we have a Shabbat potluck, Kiddush and lunch. And many times over the past years, I'm in my 8th year doing this now.
Wow.
Yeah, and all different kinds of people come. I mean, from one end to the other, all the colors of the Jewish rainbow you can imagine.
And some non-Jews, am I right?
Yes, and some non-Jews. I've had some Arab people there. I've had some Christian. I've had some from all over, because that's part of what I want to share is a more not only eclectic, but global and inclusive rather than exclusive approach. And throughout the years, people have asked me, is there a book that we can buy so when we go home, because many are visiting or living in other parts of Israel, so we can have something that we could look at on Shabbat similar to this? And my answer would always be, not yet. Not yet. Now they can't wait for me to come back to Israel. I hope I can return much sooner than later, because as soon as I return, the following Shabbat, I'm having a gathering and we'll be sharing the book together.
And before we get to the book that is no longer not yet, but here.
That's right.
Let's just so people have a sense of your Jewish bio. You were raised Orthodox, am I right?
No. I was raised on Long Island in the 50s and 60s. I'm a baby boomer. I soon will be 74. My parents belonged to the local conservative synagogue, the only local synagogue. And that's where we all went to the Hebrew school for bar bat mitzvah preparation. And a lot of us felt when we left after the bar and bat mitzvah, we graduated from Judaism. So my parents did honor and kept some of the traditions. Remember, in the 1950s, it was different than now. Not to be religious then meant you honor more of the tradition than what I've observed lately. However, we were not observant of the mitzvot per se in terms of the halachot. But I will say, after 50 plus years, having gone into the ultra-Orthodox world and come out of it, and now I'm in a very different space, my parents raised me with a lot of core Jewish values, as we learn in Ethics of the Fathers. And actually, when I started to learn text, I said, where did I hear this before? Oh, that's right, my mother.
Wow.
May she rest in peace. So it was not halachically, legally.
But it was kind of in your DNA.
Absolutely.
And when you chose to, I'm sorry I got that wrong, I knew there was an Orthodox chapter.
Yeah.
What was that chapter?
That chapter was a 15-year experience in the ultra-Orthodox world that started here in New York. With Chabad, Lubavitch in Crown Heights, and then it continued with me. And when I met Aliyah, at that time with one child, we had one child then, we lived in Sfat, and then eventually we moved to Jerusalem. And it was during that time I was heavily invested in many ways in being, or trying to be, or trying to at least be seen as I was adopting, for me, a very foreign way of life, but I kept holding on to this idea, well, if I just keep doing it, then maybe I really will feel closer to God, which was the reason I came into that life. It was not, I already believed in God, but it was more of a very abstract theology. I wanted to touch. I wanted the real experience. So
and you thought kind of the infrastructure of a more observant life was going to get you there.
I did. I really did.
And it didn't.
And it didn't.
And why did you leave?
Well, the reason I left, when I came in, there were three parts of me that I really was seeking harmony. And I thought if I adopt a more traditional, ultra-Orthodox approach, then maybe they would somehow be able to be braided together in a beautiful shiluv, as we say. One was, I really wanted to be honest with myself, with God. I have a very creative, critical, crisp, clear thinking mode, and I like to analyze and study, and I love learning text. I also like responding to it and grappling with it. And I didn't feel that part of me was encouraged. Secondly, I really wanted to honor and learn how to cultivate an awareness of an inner self, where my soul, I didn't necessarily call it soul then, I've come to learn that's what it is, the piece of the divine within me. I really wanted to be in relationship with that. And I learned a lot about the existence of that, but I didn't learn Jewish practice, spiritual practice, and it dried up my heart. I almost felt like I was trained, and I bear it's how I entered into it. No one ever was malicious or ill-intended. Just the way I went about it was not led itself to that. And then I really wanted to honor the tradition. I mean, we're starting with Avraham and Sarah, we're 4,000 years old. I wanted to know more about that. Added to all of that, I was suffering for many years with gender identity dysphoria. So that just added more salt to the wound of how can I bring inner harmony.
And talking about being honest with God, that was part of the honesty. That was
part of it. I used to go to the kotel every Friday night when my children were young, and we say on the Sabbath prayer, V'tahil libeinu, purify our hearts so we can be with you, work with you, serve and be in service to you in truth. And he used to say, if I'm really talking to God, we both know that this is a charade. It was a charade to survive. Long since I have forgiven myself, I didn't feel though I had any other options. But I knew deep inside that this is not real. This is not sustainable. And then I would say, well, if there isn't a God, well, what am I even doing this for? So either way, there were knots in my stomach. I wanted these three pieces, and the idealism in me, because I'm a baby boomer, we believe in idealists. I wanted to somehow seek a way to bring harmony to that. Thank God I have, but that's after I left that world.
And you've also become like a study addict. I mean,
Yes.
I've seen you for many years, but even since I've seen you, it just seems like you're always learning, always
learning.
going deeper. And just how did you find the paths to that? How did you pick your teachers?
Well, it started with two teachers that were in the ultra-Orthodox world. And I was going for a master's degree at Jewish Theological Seminary here in New York. And I was very disappointed by the arrogance of my professors. They really knew they had expertise. But I wanted Jewish education. I wanted to cultivate also what we call midot, like the spiritual and behavioral traits of godliness, patience, kindness, connection, gratitude. And I met a few people who taught Chassidut, or what we call in English Hasidism, and now more the Neo-Hasidism. And as a potential educator, what caught me was the twinkle in their eye, their passion, their friendliness. And I'm thinking, well, why don't my teachers at JTS, or at least the teachers I had, I'm not saying that there's none, but my teachers were not like that. And that's what pulled me in at first, was I knew I wanted to teach. And I knew I loved text, but what brought me into the text was their love of it. And I'm in love with the text. And at Pardes and Applied Jewish Spirituality, one of the key components that people like about my teaching or are drawn to my teaching, I really care about it. Like it's not important that my students agree, but my students believe that I believe in it.
Right.
And then I let them make their own choice, of
Wonderful.
course. Yeah.
So let's turn to this book, Planting Seeds of the Divine, Torah commentaries to cultivate your spiritual practice.
Right.
There are many books about Torah and the Parsha of the week. I've co-written one myself with Rabbi Dov Linzer.
With Rabbi Linzer?
Yes,
wow.
no, we had our own partnership. I love how different this is from any of them, but it takes a certain kind of chutzpah that we all have to say there's something more to be said. So what did you feel was more to be said?
You know, what you just said is one of the reasons Jewish Publication Society and the University of Nebraska Press, who jointly published the book, this was exactly one of the key pieces they saw in my manuscript that drew them to encourage me to continue with the possibility that they would actually publish it, was that it's not atypical, and I study a lot of the typical. However, I went a little bit different. I took a different course with this book. I wanted to show how I do see Judaism as a spiritual practice, which includes and begins with the intellectual appreciation. It includes inquiry and grappling with the text and trying to use one's mind to understand. But that's step one. That's not the end destination. The end destination is to let it through different practices and modalities that I have learned and teach with some of the teachers that I am a disciple of, for it to somehow move into the heart, where it then opens up the emotional landscape, which can also be an embodied experience. And when those three, the mind and the body and the heart, are together, that is the access point to our soul.
Let's talk about the structure a bit so people can imagine it for themselves. And it is a book that people don't need to read all the way through, right? They could read it with the cycle, the Torah cycle, or they
Correct.
could read a few at a time. So the first, do you have the six memorized, the 6 sections of each one?
I do.
Okay, Len, you rattle it off, and
I'll rattle it off.
Interrupt you.
All right, so the first is the title of the weekly Torah portion. And for those who are more learned, we know there were 54, but 7 of them traditionally are doubled. So I had a choice. I could go with the doubled, which means 47, which means what that really meant is I'd have more words allowed by JPS per portion. So
And when you mean parshiot?
I mean the weekly Torah portion. Right. So it's traditional. On Shabbat, we take out the Torah scroll and read a portion. And there are 54 portions. For many reasons, some of them are doubled up. So I could either have gone 54 with less words per portion or 47. So less is more.
Right.
So I have 47 portions. Each one begins with the name of the portion and then verses that support what I've extracted from that Torah portion as a seed, as planting a seed of the divine, a seed of divine consciousness, becoming more aware of what's already residing and dwelling within us, our spiritual side, our spiritual self. And each seed I refer to as a midah, as a quality trait, as a spiritual golden nugget to help raise our consciousness. So this book it's not about legal understandings or halachot or even the mitzvot. It's really about the soul of the Torah rather than external behavior. So that I identify the midah, and then I bring what's called at a first glance. No, at first what I do is I explain in brief where we are until now, because not all the readers study week to week. So I give a very short synopsis from last week to this week, what happened. Then at a first glance, that's the section where I bring down very highly respected traditional medieval commentaries. Of course, Rashi and the Sforno and Ibn Ezra, and those who are familiar, those who are not will become familiar. And they address what we call the pshat, the apparent immediate understanding, but I picked Torah portions that support my midah. And then I go into the deeper dive, which is the Hasidism and the Neo-Hasidism. When I say Neo-Hasidism, I'm referring to a movement that started with Hillel Zeitlin and Buber, Heschel.
And it's a much more spiritual dimension.
Yeah, well, it's to actually reclaim what the Baal Shem Tov was trying to introduce more than two centuries before this. It concentrated an interwar period in Warsaw. So today we have like Reb Zalman, who started the renewal, or Rav Art Green and Shlomo Carlebach and Reb Zal, these people. So I bring in different commentaries that address the deeper meaning that speaks to my relationship with the eternal. Regardless of how externally I'm observing the law, we all have a soul. And to be in relationship with that, I find to be more of a global approach, because it transcends the different external behaviorisms and their limitations.
But you're speaking pretty personally in those sections.
Well, I'm not yet.
Okay.
And then within that, I bring my own Torah.
Okay.
And that's what JPS grabbed. And it is chutzpah. You're right. I prayed for this. I davened hard. I meditated hard. I said, God, I'm going out on a limb, but I wouldn't be moved to do this if you didn't ask of this. I really felt it was a calling. And Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, I can borrow a term from him. He calls it azut de kedusha. It's a little bit of arrogance, but it's for holiness. It's
nice.
A chutzpah for holiness.
Nice. And then the practice.
And then the practice is the last section, where that's the really experiential dimension of the weekly Torah portion. So people can choose to, for example, to practice that for as long as they want. And the other way of reading the book, by the way, and not by the way it was intended, one can read it if they want to read according to the cycle, but they could look at the midah, the seed that is being introduced to plant in their own inner garden. And let's say 3 months from now, I want to cultivate more a sense of forgiveness. Now that goes way back in the book of Genesis with Joseph and Judah. So if I wait for the Torah portion, I'll wait till several months from now, but I can pick it out now. So there's two ways of reading the book that way. Yeah.
You quote Isaiah,
Yes.
comparing a person's soul to that of a plant in a garden, proclaiming in reference to the people of Israel, quote, "They are the shoot that I planted, the work of my handiwork in which I glory."
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
It is really beautiful.
Yeah.
I can imagine some listening to this and saying, and having some of their barriers go up, as you can imagine. This sounds a little bit spiritual, crunchy, like where's the bones of Torah that we are supposed to learn and absorb and live by? How do you respond to those who are resistant to, in a way, a more spiritual, heart-focused kind of exploration of this text?
Actually, I've been asked that when I'm giving classes in person, especially when I am a scholar in residence, not in, let's say, Pardes or on applied Jewish spirituality. So what I try to invite the questioner or the person...
Let's not call them the skeptic. Let's call them the
I don't like
questioner.
it. Yeah, it's their... Obviously, if they're asking the question, it's because they're feeling something inside that's...
Stuck or like a little resistant.
And I invite that person to consider looking at their own self through a different lens, through a different mirror of identity. We tend to look at the world because the way the world is, it's a physical world, so we tend to look at the world as only physical. And the Piasetzner Rebbe, Rabbi Kalanimus Kama Shapira, who was murdered during the Holocaust, he wrote about Jewish meditation. He wrote about, he was bringing in and really invoking the Baal Shem Tov's teachings of this other dimension of living. So I don't push back on a person and say the physical external world that you're operating in doesn't matter. It very much matters, and not but.
And it's not just the Yiscah Smith, kind of shooting from the hip, although that's the wrong metaphor. If there's a tradition of this, there's a long inheritance.
This is what Aryeh Kaplan, may he rest in peace, he wrote the book Jewish Meditation in the 1980s, and he said we can go as far back as the Avot and Imahot, the patriarchs and matriarchs, to Abraham and Sarah. This was hundreds of years before the giving of the Torah with all the mitzvot. What did they do? They were always in conversation with God, with the eternal, with the divine. This was for them the way they cultivated a relationship.
I want to go to a particular example in Ha'azinu, the Torah portion that's really poetry.
Yes.
And what I love is that you focus on, in a sense, forgetting how you got here, forgetting God's grace that put you on this planet, And you then extrapolate to a very personal story.
Yes.
Can you explain?
Sure, yeah. So I teach to what I believe strongly, that we have three parents, not two parents. We have a biological mother, a biological father, and a spiritual parent. Our biological mother and father, obviously at conception, we have a body. And then the spiritual DNA, which is the soul, that comes from the third parent. In a conception, that beginning of a body receives a soul. Just like Adam and Eve received breath, in Hebrew, neshima. So, neshama, the soul. That's what gave life to Adam and Eve. What gives life to this physical little tiny form at conception is this. So, what Moses is saying in Parshat Ha'azinu is there will be a day that if you're not careful, you're going to forget your third parent. Mm-hmm. You're going to forget God, who is not only gave you life, but is continuously giving you life every time we inhale. So the personal story was, I was very close with my mom as we were growing up, and I just always wanted to give her nachat, as we say, or nachas in Ashkenaz. So I would always try to do that. I really very much looked at her. She was a key figure in my own development and in many ways. One year, though, it was in my teenage years when we become distracted by being teenagers. I forgot the Holy Grail. Not her birthday. Not her anniversary. Mother's Day. Especially since I was the oldest, I made her a mother. And she was so hurt. I've never seen, she'd been disappointed. I wasn't perfect, so I know what that look of disappointment is. And she would have, like any other parent, would be frustrated at times or angry a little.
Jewish guilt.
But she was hurt. She said, I don't ask for a lot, but don't you ever, ever, ever forget Mother's Day ever again.
Wow.
I didn't think it was so important. But then now when I learned about Moses is saying, you're going to forget. So you can't forget Mother's Day, Father's Day, and God's Day. And that book helps us remember. That's exactly what my book does. I hope it's an invitation to consider really remembering every time we're inhaling, who's giving us the breath? Or what's giving us the breath?
So I guess finally, yes.
I never forgot Mother's Day after that.
I'm so
and now
glad.
that she's in the next world on Mother's Day, I go, Mom, I haven't forgotten.
Did she live to see you do any of this?
Yes. She lived to see a lot of grandchildren and.
And what about your Jewish path?
Yeah, she was and very supportive.
A
and as a teacher, she received a copy of my first book. I dedicated it to her.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, she wasn't alive to see this, but she's aware.
She's probably aware wherever she is.
Yes, wherever she is.
I just want to end with how you would love people to use this, in groups, alone. Like, what's your dream for how people...
in my proposal to JPS and University of Nebraska Press, I had to answer many questions. One of them was, please state your target audiences. Or target audience, in parentheses, S. And I cast a very wide net. Within the Jewish world, Jewish people who are Orthodox, but have not studied any spiritual texts, which happens to be the majority of Orthodox Jews. Jewish people who are not Orthodox, and who in one way or another are practicing a different way of observing our tradition, and want to learn more about a spiritual text, and seeing Judaism as a spiritual practice. And then out of that world, educators, rabbis who want to be paying more attention to the growing interest in their communities. Also to Jewish people, like many people in my family, who are more or less assimilated, but do have a sensitivity to spirituality and don't realize that we have a whole tradition for that. And then in the non-Jewish world, likewise spiritually sensitive people, and also clergy. And I want to end on this note. A dream is coming true. I just received through my publicist a review. She sent out advanced review copies to also Christian clergymen. And one wrote a book review. It's on my website. A Christian minister in Dallas. He was amazed.
Mazel tov.
So that's the light into the nations.
Light into the nations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
Yiscah
you.
Smith, the book is Planting Seeds of the Divine. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Abigail Pogrebin for In the Spotlight. I will see you next time.